is Holly Rogers, and I'm the president of Cape Cod Disaster Animal Response Team. And I want to thank you for having me here today, give me an opportunity to discuss Cape Cod DART and to discuss the regional co-sheltering plan here in Barnstable County, which is a new concept and one that is very exciting to be part of. So we'll get into that a little bit later. But what I wanted to do to start with is to tell you what Cape Cod DART's mission is. And our mission is to educate the general public about disaster preparedness for companion animals and to have trained volunteers ready to respond in times of those natural disasters. So based on that concept, there's a couple things I'd like to talk about today. One is the general public's preparedness with their companion animals. Whether they're going to be in a regional shelter, whether they're just going to be evacuated and go to an in-law's house or a parent's house or over the bridge somewhere else, people still need to be thinking about personal preparedness. And we've found in the last 4 years that there's not a lot of people who are really thinking about that. So we're going to touch on a little bit of that today. I'd also like to talk a little bit about the regional co-sheltering plan, which Falmouth, for those of you who may not know, in the last year has become the 6th regional shelter here in Barnstable County. We'll talk a little bit about what that actually means. There are 6 regional shelters, and they are Nauset, Cape Tech and Harwich, DY High School, Sandwich High School, Barnstable High School, and now Falmouth High School. And of those 6 regional shelters, 5 of them have the capability to be pet friendly. They have an assigned place. They all have supplies. We had we have Connex boxes at all 6 of the shelters, or in the proximity of all 6 of the shelters, which have human supplies, cots, Red Cross supplies, and crates, water bowls, and leashes for the pet component. The only school right now that does not have a pet component is Barnstable High School, and so we just leave that off the board. What the pet sheltering, the co-sheltering means is that in one building there are people and pets. It does not mean the people and the pets are coexisting in the same space. So if you envision, and I know I've talked to several different people, I've been to Falmouth, I know that there's a corridor off one of the cafeterias that's assigned to the pet component. And then I've heard different stories about where the people component is, and that's part of the process that we have to work towards. But in each one of our shelters, we have an assigned pet area where the clients come in, they check in their pet, they leave their pet with us, and then they go off to the human area. The sole responsibility for those pets is up to the client. It's not ours. They don't surrender the pet to us. They come in, they feed, they walk, they cuddle, they do all of that stuff. We don't say, okay, you brought your pet in, now we're in charge. Basically what we do in a shelter is we keep it clean, we make sure that the clients are feeding and walking and taking care of their pets and that sort of thing. And that we could, with enough volunteers, we could do 5 of those regional shelters if something were to happen tomorrow. So that's the first thing people need to be thinking about, is that there is a regional shelter here in Falmouth. It does need volunteers. The shelters are all run by nonprofit organizations such as the Red Cross, CC DART, ARES, which is the amateur radio, the CERT organizations, and Medical Reserve Corps. So the people that are in the shelters that are volunteering are all unpaid volunteers. They're not staff people. They're not, Town of Falmouth employees or Town of Yarmouth employees. They're volunteers who come in and are willing to be in the shelter. Which I'd like to tell you a little bit about Cape Cod DART. We're about 4 years old. We're an all-volunteer nonprofit. We have our 501c3 as of September 2008. We are out of Barnstable, and the whole purpose of our creation was so that if something like a Katrina, which now we know the whole story behind Katrina wasn't necessarily the storm that did in Louisiana, but we don't ever want to see a hurricane here that forces people to leave their pets behind. So the reason we were initiated, we were created, was to have a pet component in some regional sheltering, which we happen to have in place. So that's what we're working on. We're a small group. As I said, we're all volunteer, and it's a nonprofit. And we have been able to respond 3 times to the regional plan at 2 different shelters. We've we've responded at DY High School on 3 separate occasions, one blizzard and then Hurricane Earl and Hurricane Irene. And we responded at the Oak Ridge School in Sandwich for the blizzard in December of 2009, I believe it was. And then we responded to Oak Ridge and Sandwich for Hurricane Earl, and then we moved over to the Sandwich High School for Hurricane Irene, and we got to use that school for the first time. It's always a learning experience to get in there the first time. You never know what you're going to get in until you actually get into the school and use it as an emergency shelter. Cape Cod Dart has had volunteers who have responded not just locally but nationally and internationally in emergency situations, either because of weather-related issues, the floodings in Tennessee last year, and we've also had several volunteers who have responded nationally or internationally on either animal cruelty or dogfighting, hoarding, cases like that. And every one of those folks that comes back has a better idea of what emergency sheltering is all about for pets, which is a key component to this, because in a worst case scenario, if you have a shelter with 75 dogs and you don't have people who know what 75 barking dogs sound like, and they're supposed to man it, it's going to be very difficult for them to stay in that shelter because it's a lot of noise when 75 dogs get barking. So we encourage our volunteers to get out there, over the bridge, see what's going on, get that experience, and then bring it back. And every time we go somewhere else, we learn a little bit more about how to shelter in just about any situation, whether it's a square room like this or whether it's a corridor somewhere. So we bring all that information home, and we then get to look at the spaces we have. All of our 5 regional shelters are different shapes, different sizes, and all of those require some creative, out-of-the-box thinking. And every time we go into one, we learn a little bit more and a little bit more about how maybe better to address the situation. I'd like to talk a little bit about general preparedness for the public. I have my own, this is my cat and one of my dogs. What we try and tell people, even if they don't intend on ever coming in to a shelter, it never hurts to have a set of supplies set aside in case you have to evacuate. And these days we see more and more enforced evacuations. I mean, look at the situation in Colorado. The people who lived in that building with the shooter were evacuated from their apartment buildings for an unknown length of time. So if you've got animals, you want to take them with you. And if you want to take them with you, then you want to be prepared to take them with you and to be able to feed them and care for them. So what I do is, I happen to hike a lot with my dogs, so I have a little backpack for them. This fits right around them. And first thing and foremost is pictures of all of them with their identification, their rabies certificate. And that's what we ask for. We want to see a rabies certificate. We're not really concerned if they're licensed, because realistically we may be setting up shelter in Falmouth and we may have people who are from New Hampshire here. So it doesn't matter if they're necessarily licensed in New Hampshire, it's the rabies shot that we're more interested in, whether they're spayed or neutered, and all of that will be on here. Like to see a good picture. I always pack half of what they would normally, one of my guys gets 4 cups a day, so if we're going to go into a shelter, I'm only going to feed him 2 cups. I'm going to feed him a cup in the morning and a cup in the afternoon. And guess these newspaper bags come in very, very handy for after the effect. I include some treats. I also have portable water, a leash, a collar, a spare collar that has his name and my cell phone number on it. So if anything were to happen to him and he's got his collar on, people can still reach me. I have a reflective vest in case it's nighttime and we have to go out and do our business in the dark. My pets are more prepared than I am. I have something that at least he can be seen if he's out walking around, even if he's on leash. Doesn't hurt. So I have that. We actually use that a lot during the hunting season, where I hike over in West Barnstable. Big Bone peanut butter. Keep him occupied in a crate, because I don't know about you, but my dogs aren't necessarily used to being in crates a lot, so I bring toys to amuse them. Thankfully, this is my sneaky one. Any medicines they're on. And in a shelter that's run by CC Dart, the person that owns the pet is the only one that will administer the drugs. We don't take over the responsibility, as I said. We have paperwork that we ask people to sign, and if they were unable to care for their animal, we would be more than willing to step up. But we don't as a rule, ask people to surrender their pets to us. We're not animal control. We are not the animal lead in the town. We are just there to support the townsfolk or the people who need to use the shelter for whatever reason. As far as my cat goes, this would be her little kitty litter box. Here's her kitty litter. And I did actually forget her food bowl, but her dry food is here. And then cat food. And that's all very easy. I just put it in this little bag, and I put it all in here, lock it all up. If I need to take it out, I just take it out. I put her in there. I've got pictures on top of her so that she can be identified. When the cat comes into the shelter, we put the whole carrier right into our crates, because we have the big crates, 48-inch crates. Whole carrier goes in. So the cat never really comes out of the crate as far as we're concerned, so the cats are safe. Her pictures are there so they know who she is. Some people put their medical records. It's all different. But it's really very, very simple to do it. And then, like I said, this just all goes in there, all said and done. And this sits in my garage until something happens, or until I have a reason to take the cat out and put her in this and to do something with that. So that covers the general preparedness thing. I wanted to talk a little bit about the training that we do at CC DART, because my thought process is I'm an animal owner. I don't want to surrender my animals to just anybody, even if it's only for an overnight. I want to know that if I'm bringing my animals to a kennel or to a shelter, that the people that are holding the other end of the leash, so to speak, have some sort of skill set. So what we have in place right now, we have a basic weekend responder course, which is 2 days, which teaches people how basically to sit at that front door of a shelter and to greet people and to know what they're looking for, and to be polite and to be respectful of the fact that these people are coming in, they're nervous, their pets are nervous, what to look out for, how to keep space between dogs, different cats, all that kind of stuff. That's 2 days. And then our level 1 is a 7-week training course, which covers incident command, it covers disaster basics, which is why we do this. It covers shelter health for people and their animals. It covers first aid for pets. It covers basic handling, animal handling, because most of our folks are just volunteers, and they're for the most part, an older group of volunteers. They've only experienced their own animals. So a lot of them don't know basic animal handling skills. They don't know what to look for if you're getting the whale eye from a dog, or they don't know what certain cat behaviors might necessarily look like. So in our level 1 7-week course, we try and give them a fairly roundabout perspective on things, so that if we do have, and we've had a reason to deploy once a year here on the Cape, even if it's just real life drill, they know what to expect. They have an idea. I'm not asking them to go for 72 hours and not preparing them. We also then do, to accumulate that, we do a full-size drill exercise where we bring in our own pets, or we have other people. We may reach out to the public and have them bring pets through our exercise. And believe me, there's nothing more educating than having your pets in an exercise where you have no control over the situation. And once you bring your pets in, they're crated, and then you just have to put them in, and you know what your clients are going to feel like. And I try and encourage all my volunteers to do that at least once, so that they know what it's like to be on the other side. And then we also further encourage additional incident command stuff, which is a lot of FEMA-based online learning. We teach hazmat, emotional awareness, so that if people are to deploy, whether locally or nationally, they get some preparedness mentally about what they might be coming across, what they might run into, what they might see, especially with an animal component. I know myself, who's done quite a few responses, whenever I walk in, the first time it's always gut-wrenching, and when I leave it's always gut-wrenching, and it's nice to come home and talk to people who have done that. I'm sure that the firemen and the police have experienced that kind of feeling with the stuff that they do, but when you're dealing with volunteers, they don't really get that on a regular basis, so we try and provide them with that. We have 4 levels of training, and the 4th one goes all the way up to a management level, so that we have folks who actually have an idea of what's happening in the shelter, how they work with the other organizations, how they work with the branch director in the shelter. So that, you know, we have people who are actually in charge in each one of the shelters. We generally ask for our volunteers to be ready to do a 72-hour deployment if the need arises. And we prepare them in all of this training to do just that. And it's really tough to recruit volunteers, because we're saying to them, yes, come and do all this training and spend all this time learning, and then we'll call you when and if the storm hits. But it really is, it's a necessary evil, because when the storm hits, the people who get paid to protect all of us aren't going to be able to be in the shelters. The fire department's not going to be there, the police department's not going to be able to be there, animal control officers aren't going to be there. So if we really want to prevent a worst case scenario here on Cape Cod, we have to stop and look at and say, well, you know, we have these 6 regional shelters, they're manned by volunteers, we need volunteers to step up and to come forward and say, I'm willing to train and I want to be in the Falmouth shelter. And that's really the point that we're at, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to come today, was to get the word out about the regional sheltering plan, and that there are organizations that do need volunteers who are interested and who are willing to train. Who are willing to train just to be ready in case when that call comes out. And that's the only thing that's slowing us down from proceeding right into Falmouth or right into some other shelters is bodies. We need people who are willing to do this, or willing to sleep on a cot or an inflatable bed for 24 or 48 hours. So we wanted to get the word out, 1, about general preparedness, 2, about the regional sheltering, and then 3, about potentially having volunteers that might be interested in signing up. And if people want to find out about Cape Cod Dart further, you can visit our website at www.ccdart.org, or you can find us on Facebook at Cape Cod, capital D, capital A, capital R, capital T. And other than that, I don't know if there's any questions. If anybody has any questions. Yes, sir.
So I know in the past we've run into this issue with pets and getting the pets to the shelter, with especially elderly people who don't drive. How do you get the pets and the people to the shelter?
Well, there's a part of the regional concept. There's the Regional Transit Authority, which has taken on the responsibility for the transportation component. And one of the things about being part of the regional plan, you're not just relying on what you have in Falmouth. You're relying on the resources of everybody in Barnstable County. So if the Regional Transit Authority has agreed to say, I don't know, I'm from Barnstable, you know the areas of Falmouth you may have to go and evacuate. I'm sure there's plenty of them in a worst case scenario that you've got to go evacuate.
Right.
There's a system in place on the regional level where you reach through the REPC once we start talking about it. And believe me, we meet once a month and talk about all this stuff. And once a decision is made to pull the trigger, so to speak, and to go into shelters, if that shelter is going to be open, there's a transit agreement, and they will have an arrangement made.
So they have buses or transportation?
Yes, absolutely.
Pre-designated for pets?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Because that has come up before.
Yes.
And you know that a lot of the senior citizens and elderly won't leave if their pet can't come with them.
Well, that's the whole reason why I'm standing here today, is because we know that that's a huge issue for a lot of people, and those are the ones.
And we haven't been able to provide transportation to the shelter for them and their pet. It's just been for them.
Right.
So you're saying that the regional transportation.
And that's part of what we're developing on the regional level, is that, if it can't be just one person in Falmouth, one person in Brewster, you know what I mean? It's what's the areas, and there's a whole process that's been in place. And, and it still goes back to having enough bodies to be on the receiving end of that shelter too. If we don't have enough bodies to volunteer in Falmouth,
Right.
You can pick them all up.
Especially when you're looking at the regional impact of, let's say, a hurricane or a blizzard.
Right.
It's not just Falmouth. It's,
Oh, no, right.
It's all the towns.
Right. But the thing is it's not just Falmouth volunteers. I mean, if they said to me, Holly, we have something coming this weekend and we need to set up shelters, and we think that Falmouth, Bourne, Sandwich, and Mashpee are going to get hit the worst, I would have volunteers coming from as far away as Eastham. If they said, okay, we're only going to do Sandwich and Falmouth, my folks would come in and would come here. So it's people coming from, it's a very regional, it's people coming from all over the Cape to help each other out. We have volunteers, because of the responding we've done over the bridge, we have volunteers who would come, once I convince them, would come back over this side, probably after the event, to assist in any ongoing sheltering that would happen. And we're working on some agreements with some national organizations in a worst case scenario, where if we really did get hit, nobody has enough volunteers to do an extended sort of situation. But we're working on it. If something happened here, we got hit really bad, I could place a couple of phone calls and start having volunteers come in from the neighboring states. So, but that doesn't mean we still need a core group in each one of the regional areas to be standing at the door when we open the door, which is usually 3 to 6 hours before the event. We usually have bodies in place, ready to go with a shelter set up. And that's really our main goal for this fall, is to get some folks in Falmouth who are standing at the door ready to come in, you know. But we can, all those other issues are addressed on the regional level. It's really getting the volunteers in place at this point. Because we have the supplies now in the Connex box, which I believe is at the high school.
It is.
Yeah, yeah. That's where I last heard. Anything else? All set, thank you.
How can volunteers or prospective volunteers get in touch with you?
I did say that they could reach me on the website at ccdart.org, or find us on Facebook at Cape Cod, capital D, capital A, capital R, capital T, at Dart. Okay?
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you want me just to leave that stuff there until the next
Yeah,
job?
that's perfect.
Okay, because I
Yeah, I
know.
don't think Glenn will mind. Great. Yeah.
Just take the box.
Lights, let's see. Which one runs does the click for the thing? Do we have a remote one?
No, we don't.
Oh.
Yeah, we just kind of have to do the clicker.
This one standby?
You want to type out on here?
There you go.
This one right here. Turn a couple lights off. You gonna need more light or not enough?
Less,
Just right?
yeah, whatever suits you.
No, that'll be all right. All right, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Glenn Rogers, Deputy Chief here at the Fire Department. I was asked last week by Chief Sullivan to give a talk on a research paper I did for an Executive Fire Officer program. It was a 2-week program on emergency management down in Emmitsburg, Maryland, and it's the first time I've done the presentation. It really broke the paper down into a presentation format. So, and the topic was really firefighter safety during the hurricane, but for this group here, I wanted to change it now first responder, because I really think that it has applications for police, DNR, DPW, and even the general public. And in rescuing people, if we do have a hurricane, and some of the things that you're going to need to think about when we do it. So we move that to first responder. Let's see. See if we do up Chief Broder. This is what I learned from Chief Broder. Okay, so that's my tribute to Chief Broder. Okay. just a little bit of a background, just so I know we're all on the same page. We are approaching the hurricane season, and which is good that we have some folks here as we go. This is some NOAA map just showing some of the paths of the hurricanes. As we all know, the most dangerous ones that we need to worry about are the ones that make landfall right in there over Long Island, New Bedford, so it puts us on the right side. That track there, the main track, I believe, is the 38 hurricane. So we are vulnerable, as we all are aware. And just some simple terms to kind of work on our memories and everything. When we talk about storm surge, which is the most dangerous part of the hurricane, and is the part of the hurricane that kills the most people, is the storm surge. So we need to be aware of the terminology when we hear the forecasters talk about, the storm surge and what that all means. The mean sea level is that range between low and high, and around here we have a 4-foot, change 2 feet from mean to low and 2 feet from mean to high. So that's around here. Other places it's higher or lower, but everything's run off a mean sea level. So when we hear that, we have the 2-foot tide, and then if they talk about a 6-foot or actually greater, you can get a 15-foot storm surge, but you have to add that on top of your normal tide at that time. As we learned from Hurricane Irene, it's all about the timing. It's the location of the hurricane's landing, but also the timing of the tides. If it hits during a low tide and we get a 6-foot surge, then we're only going to see a 4-foot rise. But if we get a 6-foot surge on top of a high tide or an astronomical high tide, then we're looking at a total storm tide. And that's really what we just need to remember when we start looking at those. The forecasters are going to say a 6-foot storm surge based upon the models. Okay, so we have to, 6-foot storm surge, but then you have to look at it locally and know where you're at locally, and whether it's Vineyard Sound or whether it's Buzzards Bay. It makes a big difference. So, we all, being in this area here, we're pretty unique. A lot of other areas on the Cape, they don't have to worry about that because they either got Nantucket Sound or they got Cape Cod Bay. But here we do have 2 different tides. So, surrounded by water on 3 sides. And this is a Minot, down at the end of Minot, looking over at Washburn's Island. And this, I forgot, I should have put the guy's name down because I wanted to attribute it to the fellow, but I think it's actually Frank O'Laughlin, I think, did this. But this shows this one house down the Minot, and this is what 6-foot surge is, 12-foot and 17-foot right down at Minot. So we are very low in a lot of areas, and even here, a lot of damage, but also a lot of potential for loss of life in a house like that. If these people decide not to go, or when they're going to go, because they're having a party or they don't think it's going to be that bad, we're not going to be able to get to them in a 6-foot storm surge. So those are just some of the things we look at. Now, what I did is, I did a lot of research. We need to look at where we've been and where we are and where we're going. And I spent a lot of time going through the Falmouth Enterprises and the Falmouth Town reports. And this is the Hurricane of 38. It was September 21st, I believe, of 38. No warning of the storm, obviously. We all know the story. It was a Category 3 storm. They didn't categorize storms at that time, nor did they name them, so they really don't know what it was. But based upon all the factors that they've been able to work with, they come up with a Category 3 storm on that Saffir-Simpson scale of 1 through 5. So one thing that we came up with, and I'd always heard about, that we lost Coast Guard rescuers during this storm. And you can't see from there, but these two fellas here, William Briggs and Albert Neal, they're Woods Hole caretakers, and they were boarding up houses down on the causeway between Woods Hole and Penzance Point. And the water obviously is running over the causeway to Buzzards Bay and back and forth. And we have John Stedman, Hayward Webster, and Fred Leacher were Coast Guardsmen down in Woods Hole. And they were affecting the rescue of these fellas here, and all of them got washed out into Vineyard Sound. So these three men here lost their lives. And so that was 5 people right down Woods Hole. We also lost Alice Maurer, and she got trapped in a car in front of, I think it's Sitter's Pond, right on Surf Drive. Wave came over, washed her out into the car as she's trying to get out of her car. And these Andrew Jones and Mrs. Andrew Jones, with a picture of these two folks up there, they lost their lives up in Silver Beach on the roof of their house as it got washed away and got washed across there. So, you know, this is in a Category 3 storm, unannounced. And this is a picture down here. It doesn't come out that clear, but actually shows Ms. Maurer's car right on the roadway there between Surf Drive and I think it's Sitter's Pond. So, you know, we lost 8 there, but we lost 3 rescuers, trained rescuers, back in '38. Now, 1954, Hurricane Carol is another Category 3 storm. At this time, there were adequate warnings. They knew a hurricane was coming. And that was because of all the advances in technology from World War II. Before World War II, we really didn't have that much warning. After World War II, the warning seems to get better and better. The thing with Hurricane Carol is they knew the hurricane was coming, they gave the warning, but the hurricane actually came earlier than it was anticipated. The firefighters and police officers were actually out evacuating areas of town when the hurricane made landfall. So that became a great problem because they were out there just evacuating. They weren't really prepared at that time to do rescues. There were, I think there were in the range of 134 rescues made in Hurricane Carol by the police, fire, and civilians. And as well, just as many in the Hurricane of '38. That gives a lot of accounts too in the town reports. But just some of the, the highlights of the storm. Firefighters give out the warning. We have broken. This all talks about DPW and the aftermath of that, and the tides that actually come through Woods Hole. An invalid rescued in a home. So these are all not new things that are happening to us now that we're talking about. But it actually happened in this Category 3 storm. Now in Minot, there was 2 sisters and 3 children get lost. Actually not actually in Minot, but it was they were actually leaving a home out in Mar Vista, and there was actually a string of firefighters and civilians doing a human chain to try and get to these folks as they were leaving their house at the height of the storm, and they got washed into Great Pond. And they were found by the police department, several days later while they were in there. So it's pretty tragic losing those folks there. So it just goes on and on. It just talks about firefighters being active, but really everybody had to band together as a community because the fire department doesn't have all the resources, police department doesn't have all the resources, you know, we all don't have the resources to do 154 rescues, so they were relying on civilians to kind of help them out, and you know, how can they do that effectively without losing their own lives? And we're lucky they didn't have that whole human chain that was out grabbing and get washed in the Great Pond. And so that's where we've been. And like I say, another Category 3 storm. And I don't know if you all know the history there behind 1954 with Hurricane Carol. Is actually 3 hurricanes: Carol, Edna, and Hazel. And I believe Hazel came just less than a month after Carol, but didn't cause as much damage because of the hurricane track and the tide. And I think it was Edna, and then Hazel went further out, so it didn't have any problem. Didn't really have any problem at all. But this hurricane here is September 5th, and the hurricane of '38 was September 21st. So of course those are our highest times of the year, right? The middle of August, middle of September, and the September. So both Category 3 storms, and we've not seen a Category 3 storm since to that level. So that's kind of where, you know, I began to think that we, you know, we as a community and as public safety have a little bit of a learning curve that hopefully we won't experience, but we might. There may be some people in this room that were born in 1954, but I don't think there's too many people that were actually maybe 10, 12, 15 years old in 1954. And there certainly isn't anybody in the fire department that is still here that has that experience in 1954. So if it does happen, then we're going to be into something totally different. This is probably our next greatest experience in hurricane is Hurricane Bob, which is kind of a Category 1, almost a 2 in different areas. But this particular Hurricane Bob is kind of a recent memory of all of us here, but also an issue occurred here in the fire department that actually almost trapped a crew of firefighters out in New Silver Beach. And as you can see, this is the wave height, and this is the maximum storm surge. And you know, I know we've had a lot of talks about hurricanes at this LAPC, right? Buzzards Bay is a predominant, so is a Narragansett Bay for storm surge because of the inverted V and the velocity zones where the water actually gets trapped. So, you know, Old Silver Beach and all along our western coast are more susceptible than down here in Vineyard Sound to it. So we sent out, we had a small building collapse in Old Silver Beach, the tea room. We sent a truck from the North Falmouth station to go out to get the person that was trapped in this building collapse. And when they arrived there, the ground was very dry. And while they were there getting the person, the water came in. There's a 4 to 6, I think I wrote down here, they predicted it was 8.2 foot storm tide with Hurricane Bob at that point in Buzzards Bay. But we sent out a truck. Anyway, before I get into that, this is the maps. This is the flood zone map, and this is New Silver Beach, and where that building collapsed was the tea room is right up in here. And so there was a lot of mapping done, a lot of knowledge that this was a real flood zone. And we go on our own map that Bob Shea did a while back on storm surge, and he's got it pretty accurate. You know, we talk about sending people out to this area here, and that's where we had storm surge for this crew of firefighters that went out. And they went out in this big truck here because there was a lot of downed trees and everything else. And storm surge came in, as I say, the ground was dry like this when they pulled up. Within 5 minutes, the water was up to this level here and going through the cab of the truck. And so this is one of our bigger trucks. You think it's heavy and everything else. This truck was floating in the water because of the storm surge. And had we sent even something else bigger out there, it would have, it's really, you know, right over the tops of all the other vehicles that are there. So the other point I wanted to make, when we enter a storm surge area, whether it's with DPW, police vehicles, fire vehicles, these probably, I don't know, what is this, Joe, probably a 35, 40,000 pound vehicle, you know, you're not invincible. And the fact of the matter is, you get a certain amount of water in here, the tires are going to provide a lot of buoyancy, and the truck's going to float. Doesn't matter if it's DPW truck or whatever.
Excuse me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nature of business.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Is anybody parked on King Street? Okay. We got to move them because the police department just called. Somebody called and complained. We do have neighbors that complain. So, anyway, so the big trucks from the DPW and everything else, if we're going to be heroes and we think, well, yeah, we got this, you know, these trucks and we're going to go in and rescue people, that's what's going to happen. The buoyancy of the tires, and at a certain level here, it's going to be useless. And you know, that's what happened down there. And luckily, it came. The storm surge came in slow enough that our people were able to realize that and actually just walk away. They got the person, they were able to walk away. But as they turned around, it filled up behind them, and actually they saw this vehicle floating.
For purposes of your presentation, we actually have a video of that event.
Oh, really?
We can do this.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yep.
Yeah. So, you know, and that's in New Silver Beach, and a lot of people think, oh, it's kind of high, they got a seawall and everything else there, but you think of the other areas along Surf Drive and a lot of other areas even in West Falmouth that, you know, really, they're just a barrier beach, you know, and you know, there's a body of water on one side and a body of water on the other side, and there's probably only a foot or two higher than the water is at the time, so, yeah, so that's something there, and when our fellows went out there, they're out there in their fire gear. And so that's something we're going to send a message to our people in here. That's not the best gear to go into water with, because it becomes soggy and it traps. It's for firefighting. It's not for, you know, being out in the water. And so we got to change that. We got to change, you know, our attitude a little bit about, you know, how we're going to go in to this stuff, to the water, or, you know, we just got to be aware of the flood zones. We just escaped this 1 second because that was Hurricane Bob in '91, and as we know, we were all in Hurricane Irene. So now we were talking about the Category 3 storms, and now we're talking about Bob being a Category 1 storm, and now recently, of course, we all had our experience with Hurricane Irene. And so people nowadays, this is what, you know, we think is a hurricane now. Everybody that's alive now thinks this is what a hurricane is. So guess what we're going to do? It's not that bad, you know? So we're going to have fun, and it's not just there, but, you know, it's in Woods Hole too. So this is what our current experience of, you know, a hurricane is down here. So, you know, I look at that, and, you know, I think we're going to have some problems as we enter the hurricane season. You know, especially if we get a Category 3 storm. Are we going to be rescuing those two kids down there? I mean, here these people are way out there. And it'd be an incredible undertow. So hopefully these people have a little bit more common sense if it was a more drastic storm, but I don't really think so. So anyways, let me just flip through where we were here. Oh, shoot. Excuse me a minute. So the other thing I did was I did survey on this SurveyMonkey website to the people in the fire department. And I wanted to find out where they were as far as their knowledge of hurricanes. And there were 33 respondents to the survey. It's totally anonymous. And the first question was, are you aware of a hurricane surge zones in Falmouth? And just as you all may or may not be aware, in our dispatch area downstairs, we have a map of Falmouth and the hurricane surge zones posted on a wall in the dispatch room. And people walk by it all day long as they're going in and out of there. So I was kind of curious in my own mind whether people were really paying attention to that, whether they're paying attention to the information given out in the LEPC. So we had 28% of the firefighters in here said they were very aware of the hurricane storm surge, and actually 34% somewhat aware, and 15% said they were unaware. So we do have a large group of people in here that are not aware of the hurricane storm surge, so we got to do some education on that. And the other question is, are you aware of the effects of hurricane storm surge on emergency operations? And I wanted to get people to think about that, is that, yeah, I know the storm surge, but really what does that mean on what I'm doing in my emergency business and in rescuing people? And we really haven't done a lot of education in the department, so it's kind of like a pre-test. And as you can see, there was quite a few. There was a lot of people said they were very aware. It was over 50% very aware, 43% somewhat aware, and 6 were not aware at all. So we have about a 50-50 split. People are very aware of the impact, and 50% that are not aware of how that impacts our operations. And the final question, have you ever operated as a member of the fire department in a hurricane? So it was pretty amazing that 75% of the people in here said they've operated as a member of the fire department during a hurricane. So, it's kind of interesting because this was just after Hurricane Irene, probably maybe 6 months after Hurricane Irene. So we have a lot of people in here, just like those people that swam down in Falmouth Heights and Woods Hole, that think that they operated during a hurricane, when in reality, they operated during a tropical storm. And some of those folks may have operated during Hurricane Bob in '91, but there's probably only 15 or 16 people left in the fire department that actually were here during Hurricane Bob. So it's a very small amount that even have that Category 1 experience. So the real issue was the fourth question here. And this probably applies to the police department, fire department, DPW, maybe even a lot of citizens out there, is would you risk your life to save another person in grave danger during a hurricane? So we had 96%, 90% anyway, of the people that responded to that within the firefighters that said they would risk their life to save someone else in grave danger during a hurricane. So, we have, you look at that and you say, okay, these people are willing to put their lives on the line to do this, but they don't have a lot of background knowledge and experience, in what they're doing. So, where do we go from there? We made a few recommendations in this paper, and I've talked to Chief Sullivan a little bit about it. So we need to do some education and training. We need to look at the historical storms and the areas of damage and the loss of life that have happened before in the Category 3 storms. We need to look at what the current storm surge mapping which just shows you the whole maps that you know, Bob Shea's put out, that FEMA's put out. There's quite a few resources out there that really, you know, show the areas that we have a lot of problems with. We also, for our rescuers, it's the police, fire, and even DPW if they're out there. You know, in the wildland firefighting, there's this thing, this LCES, and it's lookouts, communications, escape, and safety zones, and that really should apply to trying to rescue people out in the storm. That we have someone acting as a lookout, we know what our communications are, whether it's hand communications, not necessarily radio communications, what's their escape, you know, route going to be, how are we going to get them back in, and, you know, a safety zone where they're going to go to escape to, and also perhaps some training in swift water rescue. And a lot of that will involve changing our attitudes in here, is not going out with our fire gear on like we did in 1991, going out with float coats, or our water survival suits that we have, or either that or just PFDs, and going out with ropes, everybody being tied to a rope, some sort of tethering system, so we get people back in. So, and not driving, perhaps driving into a surge zone, or, oh geez, you know, those fellows in 91 just didn't know. They drove up, the area was dry, so they drove in. I'm sure they wouldn't have gone in if there was 5 feet of water there. So, you know, we need to just have a plan of how we're going to do it, you know, internally. And the second part really is more of a wider system that we're doing here in the LEPC is, you know, pre-planning, evacuation system we got, public information to the residents and the guests, telling people to get out of those areas that are flood prone. I know we did that last year with Hurricane Irene to the Seacrest and everything. And the structure and infrastructure protection and planning just for the roadways and sewer systems and everything else that we're doing. And yep, that's about it. Let's say I know a lot of that info isn't, and a lot of it isn't new, but it kind of just brings, you know, us into kind of another level as we prepare for the hurricane season. So I hope nobody in here will go swimming in their Speedos and the hurricane surf there. So I know Joe's got one. That's what I mentioned.
I can't wait.
Isn't that the one you wore in Iron Man?
Okay. Well, thank you.
You remember Hurricane Bob? We were dispatched to rescue a surfboarder in the middle of the hurricane. That was Hurricane Bob.
We're going to take that whaler that we have downstairs, we're going to take that out and launch it. Because that's what we do. I mean, we go and rescue people. They call up and we go. And they were going out with the trailer and the boat and the whole thing down there, and finally somebody said, we're not going to do that. You know, there has to be some level where you say, no, you know, we're not going to go. When I was down at the National Fire Academy, a lot of the folks weren't familiar with hurricanes, so we're doing this whole planning exercise, and they're talking about the limitations of it. And the incident commander set a limitation of, I think it was 50-mile-an-hour winds. We weren't going out in vehicles. And I'm like, 50-mile-an-hour winds? I mean, that could be almost any day down here. So, you know, they weren't really familiar with the level. But is there a level? 70-mile-an-hour sustained winds? You're going to go out with this big box of an ambulance and flip over? So, there's limitations.
Isn't that part of what, and I say we, I don't mean me as being one of you guys, but those of us that are preparing for this stuff, isn't that what we should be educating the general public about? Is at some point there has to be a line drawn where we as the public can't be asking you folks to come and get us because we weren't paying attention or because we were careless. I mean, we talk about this a lot when I go out and talk to the public, because that's why we do this whole preparedness key, because we tell people, you can't ask the fire department to come back in and get you if you said, no, I'm not going after a mandatory evacuation. Just like with the wildfires in Colorado a couple months back, they said, no, you can't go. I mean, if you go, you're taking that responsibility. It's not your responsibility to rescue them if they go beyond what you've said is acceptable behavior. At some point, you have to draw
At
the
that point, they say no, because they're used to Hurricane
Right,
Irene.
well, right.
They say no, 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 no. And at some point, they're going to call yes. And are we gonna say no?
At some point you have
Is the town
to.
administrator gonna be sitting there after the fact, you know, with these families' relatives and say?
But do you
know,
lose
do it.
5 firefighters because one person wouldn't
Absolutely.
go? I mean, not to
Am I
equate
gonna be able to
life.
hold my people back?
Right, well,
I don't think so,
I don't
after
know.
looking at that survey, you know?
but as you said, how
Here we
many of
go.
them have seen a Category 3 hurricane? That's a whole different ball of wax. And I think it's coming up behind us any one of these days now. We're not ready.
Power company's not ready.
No. And if your folks are that comfortable with their awareness, and look at how educated firefighters are. Just think of how uneducated John Q. Public really is. I mean, everybody says, oh, it's not going to happen here, it's not going to happen here. I mean, I'm out all the time that say, we'll never get hit by a hurricane here. We'll always just tropical storms. Well, all it's going to take is one. And I don't want to be reading for the next 20 years about how ill-prepared we were if something were to happen. That's my big concern, is that people just blow it off all the time. That's what worries me.
Yeah, it does, and you know, the people in here, you know, I did interviews with one of the fellows that was out there in Silver Beach, and you know, I heard the story way back then, and of course, you know, that's just one instance, you know, that happened, and you know, when the other hurricanes, 38, 54, I mean, like 154 rescues, 154 people. I mean, it's very vivid in their enterprise that they divided up the little areas of town, and back then the vehicles that they had were nothing. And fire truck got stuck down in Black Beach, and it was the same areas that happened then that we're going to have problems with now. Nothing changed. So, and that's exactly what it's going to do. You're going to break up into little pods, the little areas that you're going to take care of, and you're going to be going to these same areas, getting bogged down, rescuing people. It's going to flood. I mean, Hurricane Bob, all Black Beach. It flooded for, it was like, what, 3 feet of debris in Black Beach. And it's not new. We just have to be a little smarter about it and realize that we don't have that experience. You know, as far as our vehicles, I mean, a lot of them have rusted out over the years prematurely because they were all driven in that storm. And you're talking, if I took out here $400,000 or $500,000 piece of apparatus that could probably last another 10 or 15 years after it's submerged in salt water, but it shortens the life by almost half. So, and we can't avoid that. It's not like, oh no, we're not going to drive the vehicle in the water. You know, we just have to do it. So.
But it is a big issue. The last 2 hurricane scares that we had with Earl and Irene, especially Irene, you can't fix stupid. And there were a lot of people down there on the beaches during the storm, the entire storm, with children down there. I mean, infants type children down there, right there at the beach. One truck had completely blocked Minot Road. It was sideways, and they got stuck. It was a pickup truck, but it was a large one. Our vehicles would have been able to navigate down there, but literally it closed off a road that would have been necessary for emergency vehicle access. But it's very, very difficult to prevent all that. We have a lot of shoreline. It's hard to patrol. It's hard to fix. It's hard to correct. You know, manpower. All our manpower is being utilized in other areas. You know, it really makes it hard. But it still begs that question about an evacuation. We have limitations that other communities do not have. We have that bridge, and that bridge is going to close. So where are you going to evacuate to if you wait too long? You know, and I don't think that people even fully appreciate or understand that. You know, and as far as even being able to bring resources in after the fact, it's hard to do, depending on what the wind speeds are. So, but we saw that last year too, with some of the motels and what have you, as far as when are they going to try to evacuate their buildings, and are they going to wait too long? So it started to become problematic already.
You see how many people kept trying to drive down, you know, Minot Road and Surf Drive, you know, they're being flooded. I mean, there was a bunch of videos on there, and even with the sand, people are like, oh, I got 4-wheel drive, I'll just drive over the sand. Some of them do, but what about the area that the roadway is actually washed away, but you can't see it because it's puddled over, and then once they're in the hole, they're not coming out of that. So, it's all of us, and we think it's just going to be the fire department's thing. You the police departments think. You know, it's gonna, if the category 3 happens, I mean, it's gonna have to be everybody that's part of the town that's out on the roads and doing things, and you guys have been great about building a task force to kind of go with us and clear the roads as we've gone along. And, you know, so that makes you kind of part of the whole thing. I'm sure your guys aren't going to stand there and kind of watch, you know, our guys do something, you know? You're going to help in some form or another, and maybe that's the thing. Maybe the heavy equipment is the key. And you think of these vehicles like the brush breaker thing, but that floated, but some of the heavy machinery, the track vehicles or some of the heavy vehicles may be the only way to get people out of a clearing area. Yeah. Great, thank you.
Thanks, Glenn. Just a couple updates as well. Last Thursday, I sat with Rick Latour from NEMA, and he was instrumental in reviewing and making recommendations for our comprehensive emergency management plan. So there were a few items there that need to be updated, such as cultural resources. One of the big things that we found was we are now happy to say all, if not almost all, of our hazardous materials facilities have been recognized and reported thanks to Wallace from Barnstable County. So there are some of those facilities that will add to the plan also. And everything is online now, so it's very easy. We can upload, download, sideways load, the whole 9 yards, and he was great with that. He's also willing to come down and speak at a department heads meeting because he knows what each department head's role should be that they may not be aware of, what the town accountant's role should be before, during, and after a storm or an event, what the town planner should be working on today for a future event, as well as what the town assessor should have set up now for things after, because as we know, the after's always a mess, and if we can do pre-planning in those areas. And he said one of the amazing things is that most of these department heads don't really know that they do have a role. They're unaware. So he would be more than happy to come down and kind of give a synopsis on that, which is great. We also are looking to set up a regional shelter drill. They've already had a few in the 5 of our 6 regional shelters. So we've been asked to hold a shelter drill before the end of August. We're looking at either the 16th or 23rd. And we'll be working with Chief Whalen to set that up. Basically, I'll send out an email blurb letting you know when the time